Alright, so, Soldier of Fortune 2. This is one of the few games where I've actually come into the franchise kind of a game in and then had to go back and play one of the original games. So this review is kind of going to be regarding that kind of context, in that I have my own pre-generated opinions of the game from when I played it before, when I was a lot younger, and held it in a remarkably high esteem, and I'm having to now temper that with my reactions to the game, having played it again, fresh, and also having played the original Soldier of Fortune game. For those of you who are not aware, Soldier of Fortune 2 is, as was with the sequel, a pseudo-tactical first-person shooter based around the exploits of one porn-stashed mercenary extraordinaire John Mullins, as he goes around the world dispensing, well, mostly shit that would get you thrown in The Hague, but apparently he is a hero, so we'll just have to take him pretty much at his word on that, because honestly, would you fuck with the guy who kills 1,000 people before breakfast? I know I wouldn't. Made a while back, I can't remember the immediate year off the top of my head, by Raven Software, published by Activision. This was pretty much one of the kind of classics of the first-person shooter genre, pioneering especially the level of gore physics, having modular destruction of torsos and heads and limbs, made for a very brutal and very, for the right kind of person, a very satisfying kind of experience. Obviously capitalising on the rather impressive success of the first Soldier of Fortune game. Now, to keep this in my first 3-minute review, this is a decent game. This is fine. Taken by itself, it is actually pretty solid. Its gunplay is fairly tight. Its controls are fairly good for the most part. There are some dubious choices, but overall it works well. The story is pretty disposable, but it doesn't necessarily interfere with the progress of the game. The only real criticisms I have over it are the length of some of the sections and some of the clunkiness of design just doesn't help everything gel quite as well. Whereas the first game felt very tightly orchestrated, very concise, going beat to beat to beat, this game sprawls itself out and maybe spreads itself a little bit too thin. If you're looking for something to dip into and just enjoy as a first-person shooter with some nice tech to it, then yeah, by all means, give it a go. If you're looking for something a little bit more satisfying and you haven't played the first Soldier of Fortune, I'd probably say play the first one and leave it at that. That said, also, just one very quick thing. If you are looking for this, the Soldier of Fortune 2 community, as with the first game, is very solid. In fact, I believe there is still a very active multiplayer component to this as well. So if you're interested in that, and you want to play some retro PC games, but that actually still have a multiplayer community, maybe worth having a check out. So that's the spoiler-free part of this review. Hopefully it was fairly concise. Now, Soldier of Fortune 2... we should pretty much start with the gameplay, seeing as it is, it's the bread and butter. It's exactly what you're going to be getting into. And as with the first game, you have a very nice... it's kind of tactical, but it's more focused on the arcadey side of the action spectrum, if you think about it, like the balance between Operation Flashpoint and Doom. It's straying closer to Doom, but it's still taking aspects of the more tactical side of things. You can select your loadout, you have the ability to lean, crouch, go prone. The only real drawbacks to all of this are that it just doesn't quite have the right kind of circumstances and the right kind of controls to execute this. Now, this is something which I didn't appreciate back when I played it first and foremost, when I was a lot younger, because I just didn't really care about that so much. I liked vaporizing people in a hail of 9mm ammunition. Coming back to it, especially having coming off the back of the first Soldier of Fortune game, a lot of design choices I'm now looking at again and going, why did they think that was a good idea? So to begin with, the combat, the actual physical gunplay and everything like that is, for the most part, absolutely fine. There are more complex games out there with better representations of gun physics, yes. But in terms of something that you can just sit down, pick up the controller, grab the keyboard, whatever, and just fall back on the FPS muscle memory that you'll have developed through other games, yeah, it works absolutely fine. The lean mechanics, very tight, very nice to use. There is a slight issue to that, which I will touch on when we get over to the difficulty side of things, but for the most part, it all works pretty well. The problem is that it tries to factor in some, and I use this in air quotes, realism elements that don't really gel with the flow of the game. First and foremost, and something that I noticed that Soldier of Fortune 1 did a lot better, the use of grenades. Now, in Soldier of Fortune 1, you have an item key, and you can just select the item you want to use, like a grenade or a flash pack, and hit the button, and it just throws it, as you would do on most first-person shooters for the last decade or so. There's been a grenade hotkey, correct me if I'm wrong. Whereas Soldier of Fortune 2 goes the other route of manually making you pick up the grenade and actually throw it. And having that, I mean, I bring this up, and I don't know if it's a commonly used term, but click economy or input economy when you're trying to perform an action. The difference between being able to hit one button and achieve the action you want to do, and have to that's the thing about this. Press the number key, click the actual button, and then actually allow for those two steps and the throw time of the grenade seems like it's unnecessarily complex. Plus, if you're trying to select one grenade from a few you've got on that hotkey, that press economy has suddenly got way worse. And I just struggled, because I had to remind myself to use grenades through the Let's Play, because I just was never finding a good circumstance to do it unless I already knew what was coming up, or if I just had a very good long distance line of sight. Which I feel just was a bit of a design oversight, to be perfectly honest with you. Aside from that, the only other major gameplay issue I had was the use of the ability to go prone. Now, I'm playing Chrome at the moment, and Chrome is absolutely fucking horrific for the level of movement slowing it does on your crouching and just general movement. But Soldier of Fortune 2 decided that, yeah, we should have a prone mode for Mullins, despite the fact there is no weapon sway, so when you're aiming, going prone doesn't really help, unless you want to shoot under something, and the circumstances for that are going to be pretty niche. Or you are trying to sneak by a low hedge in a enforced stealth section, again, which would be kind of shitty anyway because you move so slowly. Or we're trying to force you through a very narrow area and we just want to slow the pace of the game down to a crawl. And trust me, that third one is what came up the most frequently for me, or at least it's what stuck in my mind the most. Now, I don't know if anyone watching this is interested in game design, but if anyone comes up to you and goes, I like this section, I like the progress we've got here, the flow is really nice, but what if we were to make it slower? And give the player nothing to do. If anyone came up to you and said that they wanted you to implement that, and you didn't, break your fucking keyboard around their head, I'd be very surprised. Unless you're actually into padding out a game with meaningless delays. Near the end of the game, when you're actually fighting your way through the shop, there is a sequence where you are basically forced to go prone and crawl over an air duct through this open section, just so the game can show off how good its AI combat physics are. Despite the fact that, one, that takes an obnoxiously long amount of time to do. Like, you are there for a good 2 to 3 minutes. And two, it's not showing off anything impressive. Like, I would be more engaged if that was me down there supporting the shop agents and actually fighting back the fucking Prometheus agents. But no, it's just there as a bit of set dressing, and it's such a fucking waste. Beyond those two major criticisms, and again, I say major, they're fairly trivial in the grand scheme of things, the game is overall pretty fair to play. The only other thing that I was going to criticise it on, and this ties back to the lean function, as you go further through the game, the difficulty does scale up. Naturally, as you'd expect. My only criticism with it is that while it's doing the right thing of keeping the weapon strength the same, but just improving the competence of the shooters, so you're on a pretty level playing field no matter what, it is so easy to break the game purely by leaning. Just because the game, from what I can understand, enemies are shooting at your torso, because, again, from military and any kind of law enforcement perspective, that's where you're trained to shoot at. You're trained to shoot at centre mass. But the game gauges where your torso is by what is directly below your head. So when you lean out, you're pretty much indestructible. In fact, at some points during the Let's Play, I was basically just leaning over and walking towards people shooting, and most of the bullets were missing me. There are sections where I forgot that, Kamchatka, where I just got fucking hosed, and again, there's a nice balance where if you improve the AI and you make them more competent at like flanking you, flushing you out, manipulating the environment to get the advantage on you, that's fine. Getting a hit scan shot from halfway across the map through a fog of war that is drastically showing off how the limitations of your engine are not helping your gameplay, that's not good. That's not good, guys. It's not fun. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I've got to say about the gameplay. It works. It's fine. I enjoy it for the most part. It just didn't really get everything it wanted to get out of being a more tactical sim. So I mean, that's pretty much that. In terms of graphics and in terms of the way the game just feels, again comparing this back to Soldier of Fortune 1, which had a very consistent, pulpy style, and I actually criticised it quite a lot in the first Soldier of Fortune review. I actually gave it a bit of stick, like, oh, it's not leaning into this hard enough. It's not like reveling in the madness of the situation. And then I came to Soldier of Fortune 2 and went, oh no, it fucking was. I was pulling that shit out of my ass, because Soldier of Fortune 2 plays that shit completely straight, and I mean, like, I think in the first review, I actually referred to it as like it's an airport novel of like a fucking the Alpha Protocol. Or, that's an actual game, me. Come on, brain. But sort of the Omega perspective or whatever. Some really boilerplate action bit of fluff that you would just read just to kill some time. This is kind of what Soldier of Fortune 2 feels like. It's so po-faced. It's so fucking... oh, this is a plot you should be invested in. And I'm like, fucking why? And that problem is that bleeds through into the fucking design of the game. When you are jumping between Colombia and Kamchatka and Hong Kong and fucking Prague, like, the only mission that actually looked good was Prague. It had a really nice design to it. The atmosphere was fantastic. The set pieces were very tightly coordinated. The enemy design had this almost like intimidating presence. All the guys in the identical yellow overcoats gave me some really cool Dead Rising vibes of the cult you fight in there. Like, there was a real sense of it being like gritty and noirish and brutal, and that worked super well. And then the next, and all right, the hotel fight was also pretty solid. I really quite like that as well. But beyond that, it just became a lot of identikit feeling, just open areas with short fog of war, or it came grey corridors or big grey buildings. Like, the Hong Kong missions were so bland. They were so just, okay, it's a dense urban sprawl. I totally get that, but have you fucking been to Hong Kong? Even the slums have more character than the shit you threw together. Like, fucking anywhere would have had more character. Even the first Soldier of Fortune, when you're in fucking, I think it's Tokyo, and you're fighting your way through the back alleys. There's fucking skyscrapers off in the distance. There's catwalks above you. You're fighting your way through restaurants. You're fighting fucking ninjas. There's all this shit going on that's really engaging and tacky and silly, and it's fun. And Soldier of Fortune 2 just eschews all of that in favour of this very... it's very difficult to describe, like, sum of all fears, and the problem is that they're so forgettable. I'm having a hard time thinking of the names of these fucking films, but you know the type, the ones where there's, you know, like the deep dun 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 kind of orchestral score, and then there's the grizzled ex-agent or something going behind the agency's back to save the president from the, and it's all like, I understand that you're playing this in a way that I'm supposed to be engaging with the fucking the shit going on here. I'm just not. I just don't fucking care. It's identikit, it's drab, it's boring. There are a few flashes of genuinely interesting missions in this. The hospital fight, despite the fact that the enemies can shoot me through the fucking partitions, was a really good mission. In fact, I think Max Payne kind of has a nice twist on that as well. Like, anywhere where it feels like a wholly unique area worked brilliantly. The minute you get to Kamchatka, all of a sudden you are fighting your way through one snowy valley, then another snowy valley, then a lab, then another 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 lab. I could put a fucking beat around this, and another lab, until you are just... I lost track of what the fuck I was doing because I had no idea where I was going anymore. I could have been running back and forth up the same fucking corridor for 6 hours shooting the same 3 people and probably would have been able to tell the difference at that point. Apart from that, I mean, it looks graphically as you would expect. It's fine. The music is unobtrusive. It's trying to produce something that either needs far more graphical fidelity to really sell what's going on, or it needs to lean more into a consistent art style in order to just draw you into the tone of the setting. Not being able to achieve either kind of leaves you in this really mucky grey area. So, yeah, really. Calm, happy, nice thoughts. So, story. Now, I gave the first Soldier of Fortune a bit of stick over this because I was talking about content that wasn't for everyone's cup of tea, and in fact I had someone get a bit shirty about this. I think that video's had about 16 dislikes, which I feel is being a bit harsh considering that's a very minor part of the review. Admittedly, the review itself is a garbled mess, and I apologise for that. but I'm going to stand by the shitty conclusions I came to, goddammit. Whereas the first Soldier of Fortune was actually, now that I think about it, a lot more pulpy, a lot more fun in quite a few ways in the way it executed its story. Soldier of Fortune 2 really, as I said earlier, talking about the graphics as well, it's not hitting any major point. You are going through the motions, working out that there has been some bad thing happen, and now you've got to go here, and now you've got to go there, and you've got to piece it together. There's a double agent, but it's not the real double agent. The actual double agent's the fucking guy who's quite clearly evil, by the way. It squanders all these interesting ideas and forces them into this very boring, cliched, just by the numbers thriller. You have Madeline Taylor, who gets introduced at the end of the first Soldier of Fortune game as this badass in a catsuit and short hair, and I'm like, oh fuck, we're gonna have some fucking adventures together. And then she's your handler for 2 missions and then gets shot in a cutscene, and then for the half the game, people keep thinking she's a double agent, despite the fact that she's quite clearly not the bad guy in any circumstance. It's the dumbest no-sell. It makes me think that's possibly the point, yet it gives no other indication that we're supposed to be going, no, that's clearly bullshit. It's quite clearly the guy voiced by Mark Hamill. But anyway, it's frustrating, really. There are elements in there which I think in a better game they could have executed better. If they'd built up the suspense about the double agent, if they'd maybe put some genuine shade on Madeline, maybe revealed some thing in her past that could have compromised her, maybe make it so that she had been compromised but by the actual double agent, that would have been really cool. As it stood, we were basically just sat down and told the plot, and nothing really happens until the next bit of gameplay. And I mean, it's a key rule of any storytelling. It's show if you can, don't tell. And yet this game is just all tell, very little show. In fact, I can't think of any bit of the game that actually tells some plot through, like, gameplay. I think it's almost entirely cutscenes. And maybe I'm giving it too much shtick on this, but to be perfectly honest with you, that's kind of what I hoped for. And if I can get my own hopes up as much as I fucking like, and if you let me down, that's entirely on fucking you, mate. But yeah, it's very disappointing. It's frustrating that they took something that could have been really quite cool. Because I mean, you are an agent for a clandestine paramilitary organization completely outside the guard of any kind of intelligence agency, government. You are basically the guys sent in when there is that question of, well, why don't they just fucking bomb the place? It's like, they don't have to bomb it, they just send John Mullins in and he murders everyone. Like, that by itself, you could have a really interesting story about moral implications of that, about getting around international treaties and all that sort of stuff. Like, how do you run an agency like that without causing more collateral damage than you solve? Sicario brings this up. Like, even Sicario 2 has a very good subplot in it, purely about them being used as a disposable asset, and the government, the minute they need to step away from it, just dropping any pretense of being a civil agency and just going, no, fuck it, kill the civilians involved, just, we don't give a shit anymore, get it sussed out. Like, it's a game where there was potential for something very cool to be done with this, and it just never really boiled over into anything decent. It's, yeah, I could rant on about this for far too long, so I'm going to call it here. This is a game that I once held in fairly high esteem, mostly because it tickled that nice lizard brain part of my brain that went, I like violence, and the rest of me went, yeah, I like fucking violence, and the game was like, yeah, here's fucking violence, and I was like, yeah, it's nice. Now that I'm looking at it, and now that I'm looking at it with something much better executed to compare it to, yeah, this is fine. This does what it needs to do. It just doesn't do any more than that. Anyway, if you are looking for a first-person shooter, and this is on GOG now, so if you want to get your hands on it, you have no reason not to give it a crack at the very least. But yeah, I would definitely recommend, if you wanted to play a Soldier of Fortune game, start with 1. 1 is, in my opinion, the best. If you're looking for something maybe a little bit more of the same, so you finish Soldier of Fortune 1 and you go, yeah, I could do with more of this, then 2 is fine. It just won't entertain you quite to the same degree that 1 will. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to me prattle on about this game for far too fucking long, and without making almost no points whatsoever. And when we come back, we will be playing some more games. Some old, some new. and some I am having to drink through. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.